Hey everybody, Manny Telebera. We're now on day 62 of the seven-figure climb. And in this video, we're going to talk about the show Undercover Boss. Now, in the previous video, we talked about Shark Tank, and I think Shark Tank, within reason as far as reality goes, is accurate. It's a fair depiction of what's really going on. There's some things that they're not showing you, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. I can tell you, though, that Undercover Boss is not. It's not what it seems to be at all. For the most part, it's fake. It's not reality TV at all. And I'm going to walk you through the reasons for that. So the first thing that you want to think about, and if you want to see the most real version of Undercover Boss, what you would need to do is go back to the first season and maybe into half of the second season, and that's going to be a little bit more authentic. But at the end of the day, these shows are for entertainment purposes only. If you want a real takeaway from Undercover Boss, this is the takeaway. People who own the company have money. People who work for people who own a company, they don't have money. Note to self, own the company. Because within reason, they just show a lot of people with financial difficulties on the show. Now, I'm going to tell you what the problem with the show is. The problem with the show is they are randomly going to businesses and they're going to follow someone around with a video crew, and this person is entering a contest to start their own business or something. There's a storyline there, right? Well, I think for the most part, people know cameras do not follow around poor people. Cameras follow around rich people pretending to be poor people. And if it was just one camera guy and this person entering the contest, it might seem a little bit legit, but I'm going to tell you, these people have a crew of 15 or 20 people. They have people who are just in charge of sound. They have people in charge of lighting, and they have camera people, and they have a lot of all of this. And so within reason, anyone with any common sense is going to realize there's something going on here. There's something more than meets the eye, i.e., this is not what they're saying it is. Now, this is the problem. If you watch the first season, they might have been able to get away with it for the first season. They might have been able to go and be undercover and people don't realize what's going on. But after the show's been out for a season, what do you think everyone's going to think when people show up with video cameras to the business? They're going to assume that it's Undercover Boss. It's a huge show. It's on national primetime TV, and you can't get around that. So the only way you could technically get around it is if you were filming a bunch of 60-year-olds who aren't on the internet at all and maybe don't watch TV, and they're half a generation back or a generation back. The problem with that, though, is if this person is 60 years old and he goes to work and there's a new guy and cameras are following the new guy around, the guy's going to go home and tell his wife. He's going to tell his kids. He's going to tell his grandkids. And every one of those people are going to start Googling. And then they're going to say, does it look like this guy? Does it look like this guy? And so the bottom line, you can't fool the general buying public. The other thing is, if you watch the shows, you can tell the people who are on the show even are pretending that they don't know the person, but you can tell they know them just by the way they act, just by the things that they're doing. You can tell this person really wants to get on the show, and they're doing everything they can to get on the show, and they're pretending to play along with the thing, but they know exactly who they're dealing with when they're on the show. Now, there might be a few people who don't. It's a possibility, but in my opinion, within reason, if a camera crew of 15 people show up and they've got a new person with them, everyone's going to immediately assume that it's Undercover Boss. Like I said, you just can't get around that. Now, this is the other thing. So at the beginning, it was Undercover Boss, and what they would do is they would go and they would find the business that needs the most help. and they would try and figure out what the problem is with that business, and they would try and give some insights and help the business owners and help the people who are running it, and they would try and do an intervention there, kind of. But it quickly went off the rails, and it wasn't that anymore. And they didn't just go to the worst businesses. In a lot of cases, they would go to the best businesses, the businesses doing the most traffic or making the most money. Now, another thing that you need to keep in mind, what they're also doing is they're following around not one person. So if you watch a show and on an episode they're following around two or three different people for like, one business, I can tell you that's not the reality at all. They do that in multiple cities at multiple businesses, and they do 10 or 15 of these. And then what they do is they take the best story. And the best story is the person who is struggling the most, needs the most help, has the most problems. And the worse the story is, the more likely they are to be segmented. And then at the end of the show, there's a reveal, and the owner gives that person some money and sends the person's kids through college and donates money to that person's charity. Just all kinds of nonsense, right? Now, I'm not saying those people don't deserve the money. I'm not saying any of that at all. But what I'm saying is they're looking for the worst. They're looking for the person who's in the most dire situation. So you see people who are working for these companies that are homeless, right? I'm going to tell you something. If I owned a company and I was going to be on Undercover Boss, I would be completely embarrassed to think that somebody who worked for my company is homeless and living in a car. And they have that. And you see a lot of stories like that. But like I said, they're not just following around the two or three people that you see. They're following around 15 people over a period of 3 or 4 months in many, many different markets. And then what they do is they take that biggest human interest story. So the person who's sick, or the person who lost a loved one, or the person who got cheated or went bankrupt or something, and they're gonna spotlight the person who needs the help the most. And then of course that owner is going to save the day by giving that person a lot of money and helping their family and all that. So I'll give you an example, and I think it's comical to me. I think it's 7-Eleven. I could be wrong, but you might go and see if you can find it, because if you can find it, it's comedy gold, really. So this place sells more coffee than any of their other stores, right? By far, right? So we've got to go and figure out what they're doing right to sell all of this coffee. And there's this lady who's the manager of the place, and get this, she knows every single person who walks through the door by name, all 8,000 customers. She knows them by name. They call her mom, or some of them call her grandma, and they all treat her like that she's family, and she treats them like their family, and she knows all of their kids' names, and she knows their names. And she's really good with this customer service. And she also takes care of all of her kids, and she volunteers in her spare time. And she's also only got one kidney or some ridiculous thing, right? So she's got all these health problems, and on top of that, she's volunteering, and she helps the homeless, and she feeds the homeless, and she takes care of her own family, and she knows every person who walks through that door. And it's just, like I said, it's just comical to me. And like I said, the reason they used her in that episode on that show was because of her backstory. And another really good example of this is if you go to FHL, Funnel Hacking Live. I'm a huge fan, but if you go to Funnel Hacking Live and you watch the first 5 people on stage, the worse their story is, the bigger the climb, right? So the worse the story of struggle, the more likely they are to get on first. And that's basically the same deal. So the bigger your story of struggle is, the more pain you're in, the worse your situation. That's going to be the people who they're going to segment on the show. And I don't remember one of those shows. It might have been Popeye's Chicken or something, where they they're doing the segment at Popeye's Chicken, And the people who work there don't eat there for lunch because they don't get meals that have price they can't afford to eat there. So they're leaving and going to Taco Bell, and they work at church, they work at Popeyes. It's funny to me. It's like, would you really want your people knowing that that's the way you're treating your employees? But like I said, it's more for dramatic effect than anything. And they certainly give away money and they certainly help people in need. But what's interesting is it's a snapshot. It's one person in that company, and that company has 3,000 other employees. And of the 3,000 other employees, there are probably 2,975 stories that are very similar to the one they just told. Like I said, note to self, people who own the company have money. People who do not own the company have no money. Note to self, own the company. And everyone who they tend to talk to is broke. They're broke. They're struggling. They're having all these health conditions and money problems, and they're homeless. And so it's a show for dramatic effect. And like I said, if you want to watch the most authentic version of it, maybe the first season and half of the second season. But at the end of the day, everyone knows people do not follow around poor people with cameras. People follow around rich people pretending to be poor people. They're not going to burn all that energy. And like I said, if it was a legit documentary, it wouldn't be ABC, NBC, or CBS. And it'd be one camera guy and maybe a sound guy. But because they have this huge team, everyone has to know that it's a big deal. So I just thought I'd give you some insights on that, but we're going to end out and I'll see you all in the next video, and thanks a lot.